Hello, everyone. Welcome back to A Podcast of One's Own, the podcast made by members of Edinburgh Napier's Feminist Society. Following on from our science-based last episode on climate justice and how it's a feminist issue, we are going to be chatting about women in STEM. But before we jump in, I'm going to introduce the exec mates, that's your new names, who are STEM students. So Aurora, would you like to start us off? Who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Aurora. I'm the treasurer. I'm a fourth year in psychology with sociology. I'm not sure there's anything else to it.
Esther, tell us about yourself and what you study.
I'm the president of FEMSOC, and I am also in fourth year, and I'm in animal and conservation biology. I actually started out in biological sciences, but I transferred sometime in second year to specialize in animal conservation biology. So I'm on sort of the other side of the STEM fields.
You are both doing your final year projects at the moment. On my course, we called it a dissertation, but you don't call it that.
I know it's a bit confusing,
but it's essentially the same thing. Yeah, it's the big thing at the end of your fourth year that makes you want to rip your hair out.
Yes, 100%.
So, Esther, do you want to quickly talk about your subject?
Yeah, so I am actually sort of bridging over across sort of between both biology and social science. So I'll just start by saying STEM fields like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, originally, or I feel like historically, it's been sort of like the science, the S part of it has been very focused on like life sciences and physics, chemistry, and biology. But obviously from what we're talking about now with Aurora as well, the social sciences are also sciences. So incorporating that sort of those fields under the STEM umbrella makes it a lot more, like even more sort of diverse than it already is with the 4 STEMs. So I think it's very interesting talking about this field in general because it really is not, they don't have that much in common. There's a wide variety under the STEM umbrella. But yeah, we can get to that later. My project sort of is, I guess, multidisciplinary in the sense that I'm looking at motivations and emotional and rational motivations for career choice, for choosing a career in conservation science based on, I'm looking at it through a gendered perspective. So first of all, what are the motivations? What are the reasons people have for choosing to start a career in conservation? And is there any difference between genders in what that underlying motivation is? So it's really marrying both my passion for the natural world and science, feminist interests.
So this podcast episode is made for you, or you're made for it. It's that sounds so interesting, and it makes so much sense considering your last session, which seems like forever ago. It was so detailed and from such a good perspective, is because you've been living it for the past months, years.
I really feel like it's I don't know if that's what I would have thought in first year, because I've looked forward to doing my honors project since first year, but I don't think I saw it being something like this. I probably thought I would be out doing field work, but now it just makes so much sense. It's kind of culminated my entire uni experience being very almost equal measures surrounding FemSoc and society activities and actual curricular activities and studies. So they're really coming together, which I think is pretty awesome considering what we were talking about in the ecofeminism session. I don't think that the two topics of gender equality or equality in general and environmental work can really be separated. So for me, it's super super exciting.
Amazing. Yeah, I just finished a book today actually, Climate Justice by Mary Robinson, and it was really good. It was like a good introduction to the topic, but it was like only just scratching the surface of the fact that it's like women and people from like maybe minority ethnic backgrounds or poorer backgrounds are the ones suffering from climate justice. So those are the voices that need to be heard. And it's like, yep, I know Esther has told me this. What can we do next?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've like never ever read something from that before, I guess that's a good start. But like you say, sometimes it interweaves a lot deeper.
Yet again, it's so easy to end up like when you surround yourself with people that are passionate about all of these things, eventually you're gonna come across aspects of social justice that that you hadn't heard of before, but then you learn, and then but when you're in a sort of a community where you talk about and learn things consistently, you do in a lot of ways end up and find yourself in an echo chamber. So I think it's, for me at least, I quite easily forget that many of these connections that I have made or that friends of mine have made and then informed me of, that a lot of people don't, because they're not in these circles or because they're not in that field, they don't have the same, they don't have access to that sort of line of thinking or those experiences that will give you that understanding. So I think it's really great to be talking about, because there's nothing wrong with not having made those connections yet, because it's not really accessible.
I think that's subtly a plug for everyone to join and continue with FemSoc, because you will learn so much and then take it to your science subjects or humanities. Yeah, friends, family. So yeah, Aurora, would you like to tell us about your project? We already know that you want to rip your hair out, so you can skip that fact.
Yes, well, well, I'm doing a project on like investigating. I'm going to tell you the title now because it sounds fancy. It's called Investigating Differences in Reaction Time and Working Memory Between Action Video Gamers and Non-Gamers. So that's the funky long title. But basically, I'm just like running some. I mean, but anyway, I'm just running some working memory and reaction time tests. I keep wanting to say retweet because it's RT, the abbreviation. It drives me crazy every time. Like, I'm running some retweet tests, and I'm like, no, that's not it. Some reaction time tests to see if action video gamers react faster and have better working memory than non-gamers. Basically, working memory is just a memory you use. It's like very basically short-term memory, but like in the working processes. So let me just sum it up that way. Yes, I'm struggling with getting my program to run properly, or like having to work out the program because of COVID. I'm using a different program that I usually would have used. So figuring that out is a little bit hard, but yes, we'll get there. We'll get there.
I believe in you.
Thank you.
Is that a subject that you like kind of saw yourself going into at the start of your degree, or was it like a sort of maybe not last minute, but like this is it, I suppose, in fourth year?
Not really. Like, I started off my bachelor's because, I mean, for me, it was in a way that I started off looking for a bachelor's that would fit a master's I found interesting. So I found this master's that was going into like psychology and linguistics, or like psycholinguistics, neurolinguistics. I was like, okay, I need to do something that has psychology in it, or neuroscience or something like that, to get into that master's. And then I started off doing this bachelor's, and then did I mention what I'm doing? I think I did. Psychology, sociology, right? Yes. My working memory is not great. But yes. So I think I just like maybe somewhere around third year, I was like, actually I'm more like, I'm also interested in like going into like the direction of like computing, that kind of stuff. So then I've now applied to a bunch of different kinds of masters, some of them in the computing field. So let's see how that goes. But yeah, so in summer, then I was like, okay, how do I combine, like, I wanted to do something that would, look good on a master's application. So I was like, let me combine somehow like technology and psychology and all that. So my first master's choice would be like a human technology interaction master's. So I was like, well, let me get something that, you know, includes technology in a way, and then also like the psychology part of it. Because obviously I'm doing psychology, so my honest purpose, I had to include that to some extent. And yes, then I did this, which is a little bit trickier than expected, but we'll get there.
You will. No, I believe you. Believe you? I believe in you. It's quite interesting that, you know, I guess some people think that maybe sociology and psychology are like just sitting down and talking to people and doing group, I don't know, info sessions or something like that, but it actually drips into other STEM topics quite easily. And we'll come back to this later, but the idea that STEM is just like 4 separate subjects and they don't intertwine isn't actually true. And they're also very, very succinct in terms of like the diversity gap and gender equality. So yes, Laura, the little stress bean, you were the one who presented the session on women in STEM, which was really detailed. And one thing that stuck out for me, I think it was one of the first slides that you spoke about the 4 primary reasons for the lack of women in STEM. And I'm just going to list them. I won't ask you to ring them off the top of your head. That would be kind of cruel. So the first one you detailed was the environment shaping of girls' interests and motivations. Number 2 is the social bias, which affected their progress and career choices. Third one is institutions from young age up till university not making necessary changes for women students. And fourth, the lack of role models just about everywhere. And along with this, you spoke about just like general gendered stereotypes in the media, as well as education and just the whole fact. And I think it becomes as no surprise that STEM is, like many other places, is just so male and white dominated. Like the culture is just something that is really hard to break, no matter how many mentorship schemes or fast track application thingies you put in. Unless you really change the culture, there's not much that you can do about it. Yes, before we start, digging into that, I kind of want to ask you to cast your minds back. Think of little baby Aurora and baby Esther. And do you remember when you started to really become interested in your subject? It could be either maybe science in general or specifically like tech and computers or animals and conservation.
This is like, it's a fun little fact, but I can't stand insects personally, and I can't stand blood and all those kind of medical things. But my 2 favorite books as a child were this one first aid book that my grandma had to read out to me when I was nervous or something. So she'd read this whole first aid, how to apply, this, how to do that, injections here, and I was so interested in it. And then the other book was this massive, it's a massive book, just all about insect facts and whatever, and I just read through all that and I was like, wow, look at that. Well, I can't imagine doing that now because I'd be like, oh god. But anyway, like my interest in like all those kind of science things were, I think, probably always there. Like I was a really dinosaur enthusiastic child. I knew all the old facts and all that. And I was like, I'd rattle them off. My mom would be like, great, I don't know what you're talking about. That's amazing. And then, I mean, I did like with the German school system, I did like kind of like A levels a little bit, like biology focused last few years. So I had like 5 hours of biology a week, that kind of stuff. So I was always really interested in the biological part of it. So like all those like genetics, evolution, basically everything that's to do with biology, I was really interested in. It's also my favorite part of psychology. It's all the biological things. So I really enjoyed all the neural connections here and all the brain areas and all that. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, like the interest in science and all that has always been there. And I mean, I remember from when I was small, the computers were obviously those humongous monsters trying to keep up and all the little discs and everything like that. But I always found them very fascinating. So I always liked all those computer things, but I just probably never got encouraged to go into the computer field, to some part because it was so new. But also I think to some part because obviously technology, etc., is always more the male area than for girls. I mean, that's not necessarily for my parents, but just the general school system isn't very encouraging. For I don't think for anyone, but especially for girls to go into science or like those computer specific sciences.
Did you ever have? We called it home economics. It was like baking and cooking, and so
No.
No,
we don't have that in Germany. I think we should to some extent because I know too many people who don't know how to cook pasta. But anyway, so I think those like I mean that's obviously my personal opinion, but I think those things could be helpful to anyone. Just don't make them like girl focused things that girls should know how to cook and all that. But I think anyone should know how to cook at least the basics. But they're not really a thing. I mean, in my school they weren't a thing. I don't know if they're a thing in other schools in Germany, but I haven't really heard of them. I know they do them in Finland, but
yeah, we had that. But it really did feel like it was almost like a it was almost like a fake subject. It was like on the side of all the other subjects.
Yeah.
I can remember when I think I've always been really interested in the natural world. I think honestly, well, obviously, I wouldn't necessarily like attribute it to my parents. I think it really has to do with me and like I think you're not only your parents, but my dad has always been very sort of enthusiastic about the natural world. And I remember when we were kids, me and my sister, we would be getting we had this like monthly subscription. I think it was some sort of like National Geographic like wildlife card. So you had like a big binder, and every month you'd get like kind of like if you had a subscription for a newspaper, but every month you got like one. It was like a technical note, like an infographic, like an info card for one species with like all the different facts about it, and then you like got one every month, so you filled up that binder that you had. And I just remember reading about it and feeling like it was so interesting. And also definitely had like a dinosaur period. But when I got older and I started thinking like things that I actually want to do, I was always really fascinated with astronomy, and I always really enjoyed maths in school until I got higher up. And I think really now when I think back to it, it is a bit sad because I definitely think that there were some like some conditioning and some limiting beliefs that I had developed over time that made me think that maybe I'm not good enough at physics and math to pursue this. And then I veered more towards biology and chemistry, which had also been like definitely big interests of mine. But it's interesting to just like hypothesize, had I not had those limiting beliefs, would I have chosen physics instead? Because what we know is that biology is definitely more, it tends to be less gender biased than the other STEM, like than engineering, for example, or sort of the physical sciences. But I definitely, always had a like fascination with science. And when I got higher up in my education and kind of got to narrow down a little bit more, I think like I did in international baccalaureate, which I guess is kind of like A levels or like advanced higher. I don't really know what level it is, but it's like what I did before university. And there I remember you get to choose topics that are like higher level or standard level, and I chose all the like the maximum amount of science topics. Like I did chemistry and biology, both higher level, and absolutely loved it. I remember going to double biology classes. Like I would go to the same one, and then the other session that was like the same lecture that I'd already had, I would go to that one as well, just to do it again because I loved it so much. Real big nerd. But yeah, I think the interest's always been there, but I think it's really just theorize about where I could have gone if I had it maybe been influenced by what are considered maybe more soft sciences and more hard sciences.
Yeah, it can sometimes just be like the deciding factor of, like, if you've come to like a crossroads and people say, oh, maybe, oh, you can't really do this, or you shouldn't be doing this, but you're just so, there's like that underlying thing of it's in your brain and you're like, no, this is actually where I'm supposed to be. And there might be no other evidence around you of other people like you doing that, or it's just not deemed acceptable or like normal for maybe a girl to study certain things, but you just, it's almost like, oh, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. And then later on you figure out, oh, that was a big thing what I did, and I didn't even know how big it was.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting with like Aurora's discipline as well. In like social sciences and behavioral sciences, especially sociology and psychology, I think is sometimes even skewed towards to favor women, which is interesting compared to my field as well, which is like biology as a whole is quite even. Biomedical sciences were very even, medicine is very even, and then you go to conservation and environmental science, and then it's also favoring women. But I think for both of these fields, this is at the undergraduate level. So a lot of women, as compared to men, sort of choose these things because they believe that it'll afford them more maybe communal values, and they're what's like in the literature, it's known as either like a field is perceived to be things oriented or people's oriented, and things oriented would be maybe more technical things like a computer engineering degree or like a physics degree, where there's like more people's oriented would be maybe psychology or medicine or nursing. And it's interesting because you can see very clearly the patterns of who chooses to go where in the undergraduate. And in both of these fields that me and Aurora are in, a lot of women do choose them. But then when you go up there's what they call, especially in academia, it's what they call the academic pipeline. It leaks women. So at the top, there's the skew is reversed. So the higher up you go, the less women are there. And when it comes to sort of associate professors and fellow, like research fellows and so on, like lecturers, PhDs as well, it's definitely favoring men in all of the fields.
Aurora, for your subject, did you feel like skewed in some sort of way, or like by family or schools? Did they motivate you or demotivate you in a certain way to study what you are now?
Well, I do think, like, I agree with Esther. I didn't even think about it until she mentioned it, but I did have a really big interest in like all those, planets and all that kind of stuff. So I think with the right motivation, I don't know, maybe I would have been like, never mind, that's too much for me. But maybe with like a different path, I would have gone into, I don't know, astrophysics, that kind of things, because I did find it really interesting, but my physics teachers were absolutely horrendous. But I think what's like, I mean, that's obviously a little bit overlapping, but for me personally, it probably was my undiagnosed ADHD that did a lot of things as well, because first of all, it makes me lose interest really quick, but it also makes me like gain interest in things so fast. I switch between topics all the time. So I'd be like, oh yeah, Alexander the Great did this and this. And then people would be like, girl, we're talking about like bushes. And I was like, oops. So like, I think that was for me a big part of it. But I also think that's another thing. I don't think the sciences are, first of all, they're not accessible to women in a way, because like those like hard, like more science like physics and chemistry and all those things, mathematics, they're more geared towards men anyway. But I think as well, like if you have a disability, for example, like my ADHD, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I would assume the field probably isn't super accommodating for women in that field anyway. I'm assuming it already wouldn't be accommodating for men, but I'm not quite, I can't say anything on that because I haven't looked it up. I also can't say anything on the women part, but I'm assuming it would be like that. Because
I find it really interesting.
I guess it would be, yeah, no problem. I think it would just be attributed to, you're a woman, you can't do it, instead of being like, hey, my brain's literally blocking me and I can't wrap my head around this bit. So I think that's the main
but it's really interesting that you're bringing that up, because I think there's a gendered element to that as well. As we know, like women tends to be diagnosed with these types of learning disabilities way later than men do. Like boys get these assessments very early on as compared to women. Like you got your diagnosis last year?
Yeah, in September. So it's like pretty
22, 23, whereas
23, yeah.
a lot of people, I think many boys will go through that assessment way earlier, when they're maybe 13 or even younger.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of picked up on in a different way, because it has a different expression in boys and in girls, or at least tends to be. So I think that's also a way in that a lot of factors come together that make it harder to make maybe like interest-based choices, and they're not influenced by feelings of sort of inadequacy and lack of capability.
It was like that video that you showed in your session. I can't remember which one of you it was. They overlapped. And it was a lady talking about maths results in a school or a university.
Oh yeah, I think that was in my session.
Yeah, and she was saying like, well, girls just don't score that highly in maths, and that's why they don't like it, and that's why they're not going further. And it's like, maybe there's a reason why they didn't score so highly. Maybe it's because they have something like ADD or dyscalculia or ADHD or whatever.
And sorry, I'll just like the literature research also shows that interest is super linked to performance, and if people and if girls are not, and also like other people's expectations, and it's very clear that teachers and parents and society in general have very different expectations of girls and boys in these subjects. So girls would maybe first of all not be expected to do as well, which already puts them at a disadvantage, because they won't be getting the same sort of support, and they won't be encouraged. They would, like all of these things that build up interest and build up self-confidence are not there for girls earlier on in their. So even if they, I definitely believe the results that might be showing that early on girls might not be scoring as well, but I definitely think that the underlying factors there is that there's not enough support or not enough encouragement sort of building up their confidence and building up their desire to learn and desire to do well in those subjects.
Yeah, I think it would be like, for example, in math class, I'm pretty sure, like, I mean, it's been a while since I had math class, but from my experience, I would say, when boys struggled with, not that they really, I mean, not, of course, I'm assuming there were boys who struggled with math. It's not like that's, a thing that all boys are naturally born with a talent for math. But it's just assumed they'll figure it out. Whereas for girls, if they have an issue, it's like, well, that's kind of expected. You're a girl, you're going to have issues with math. Try and figure it out yourself, or blah, blah. So I don't think there is enough. I think because math is taught in such a straightforward, like in such a, like, not straightforward, because that's the wrong word, because that means it would be clear. It just isn't always.
Yeah, but it's in a very
it's such a set line how to do it, instead of being like, hey, listen, think about it like this, or think about it like that. So I don't think there's enough accommodations for, I mean, again, I'm not an expert. I don't know if girls think differently than boys, but I'm assuming it's a personal thing and not like, a girl versus boys thing. I assume it's a brain versus brain thing. So someone will just think differently. And then it's just not going to work for you if the school's like, no, we follow this path, so you have to do it the same way. If it just doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for you. And for boys, it's a lot more, I think there's a lot more accommodation in sciences to be like, think differently, do it differently. Whereas for girls, it's like, well, you're not smart enough to think differently, just follow this path. which doesn't always work.
And I think as well, like internalizing it, like if you're not good at it immediately, then you think, okay,
definitely.
well, I'll just do like a more sort of girly and that doesn't demand this of me. That's something that I'm good at already, something that I'm encouraged to do, like caring, for example.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think there's the other side of like the topic is if there's not enough women in those, like, I'm not sure are they called hard sciences or just make that up, you know, physics, etc. Then there's also not enough boys or men in, you know, stuff like psychology, nursing, all those things. There's obviously a different side to it as well, which is like, that's why I think we should like just aim to make those all topics as, you know, interesting to everyone as possible. Just make it accessible to anyone, because we're missing out on, you know, like women in STEM offering different perspectives, talented people there. But at the same time, we also miss the nurturing men in the nursing profession, because which would, you know, if there's one person, there's going to be others who follow. But if you don't, that's going back to the role model thing. If you don't see role models in your everyday life, pictures depicting nurses are generally always women, whereas then mathematicians or IT technicians are generally always men. So of course you're going to be like, well, I'm not going to go into that field because it's not going to be accommodating to me, or you're just not going to feel comfortable.
Sometimes I think if you just, I mean, preaching to choir here, but like if you just broke down patriarchy and capitalism, then there wouldn't be this constant stress for people to like align themselves in a certain way, that like guys wouldn't feel like, oh, I can't study English because books are for girls, or I can't do nursing because that's a girl's profession or whatever. I'm going to go to war and kill myself for my country because that's what men do.
Exactly.
Men or whatever.
I mean, from our point of view, they're just symptoms of this other issue. So in order to actually fix them, like, yes, we can make sure that we sort of show role models to kids so that they can see that it's possible, try to promote certain degrees in a way that makes them seem desirable to the people that maybe wouldn't have chosen them otherwise or wouldn't have considered it. Those are all good things. And also like implementing support while you're at university so that people don't drop out, because that's another way in which we're losing people. And that's all good, but that's also kind of, you know, that's treating the symptoms rather than the cause. So I think what we need, what we're arriving at now, I feel like, is that it's all of this I mean, it historically has served a purpose. It doesn't have to anymore. We're now at a point where we are still stuck in conditioning that we internalize and that we impose on others and that we perpetuate, that keep us in a loop that is ultimately limiting everyone.
I think another thing that it literally I just thought of is stuff like a lot of these things I only developed an interest in university by, you know, going to societies, by listening to these kind of things, all that kind of you know, TED Talks, videos, FemSoc, or even just my course itself. Like, it just didn't cross my mind before that I could go into something that combines psychology and computing. So I think it would be in a school, like, because schools, at least in Germany, they're very much, you need to do these and these topics, but they don't introduce the whole variety. So it's not even necessary. Obviously, they can't cover every single thing that would it would never leave school. But just like, I don't know, maybe some courses from literally just a young age on, like, I don't know, once a week. It would be 1 hour a week. It wouldn't even be that much extra, without any homework or anything. Just, you know, introduce videos, introduce those kind of things, so you can develop your interests. Or like, you can have the idea of, oh, that could be an interest to me beforehand. Or what I think is, you know, how university is very much, you know, you've done your bachelor's, and I mean, some people might add another one to it, but it gets trickier as soon as you want to do that. Or you discover it halfway through your fourth year after you want to do that. You're not going to stop your bachelor's now. You're basically done.
No, and it's also like some people will have invested a significant amount of money and they won't be able to do another bachelor.
Yeah, exactly.
After. Like, most people wouldn't be able to pay for 2 bachelors back to back.
No,
you
definitely
know?
not. Yeah. So I think we need to make that more accessible as well. And just like financial, like, as you said, like, you can't just afford to do like 2 masters or 2 bachelors or whatever. Just like offer easier like options there that would be feasible for everyone.
I mean, the business model of education is
yeah, definitely.
that's absolutely vile. But I think it's just to sort of bring in why, like, the importance of actually, like, because it can be easy to say, oh yeah, but if people just actually, if we've now ended up with having different interests, just let it be that way. But I think it's important to highlight, like, what consequences it can have to have a really
and
like
what the
skewed
source
gender
is, why.
distribution in it. Yeah, I mean, there's been, for example, like, I'll pick an example from my field just because it's what I've been looking at recently.
Yeah.
Is that in say, for example, like conservation management, it's the patterns show that different, like, there's a gendered element to what, for example, mitigation and like conservation and protection strategies that people favor. Like women and men tend to sort of prefer different approaches to things, and they'll provide different sort of solutions to things. And this is obviously very generalizing, but by having a really skewed gender distribution, you're actually favoring a very, like, a set perspective on things, which can be limiting us in terms of like all these different things that people actually do value, like innovation and you know, healthcare and things like that. We can see it in medicine as well, like we talked about in the gender and medicine session last year, when that field was sort of like modern medicine was growing at a sort of peak rate. There were mainly male doctors, and still today, most, like we said, like most clinical trials and things are led by male doctors and also sort of undertaken on male subjects. So all the findings will be related to sort of the male, like cis male body to do. And I think that many good ideas are being just lost because people are not in the right place.
Yeah, it's okay for maybe like universities to do like a women in STEM talk when you're in third year, when it's like too little too late and you're not in the subject, you don't know what you're doing or whatever. By that time, like I think it's quite common that most people drop out of uni in their first or second year, for like financial reasons and whatever else. So it's like it's you're not reaching the people that you need to reach at that point, I don't think. I'm not saying that like you guys don't need as much help or whatever, but if you want to actually like nurture the next generation and actually help and mentor them, then you have to do it at like such an early age.
I think
like I think really build confidence and show both young boys and girls that, like, actively show them that these beliefs, I know that like oh, like, I know you have these beliefs, don't believe them, you know what I mean, like really debunk the myths, because I know, like, from my own personal experience and from what like research is showing, like kids internalize these things so early on, and then it's so hard to get them like neutralize it.
Yes, I also think to some extent those, you know, women in STEM events, whatever, I can't say I've attended a lot of them to be like, yeah, that's definitely what it is. But I think they're meant to be, you know, encouraging, I think. But I think they can, in the end, make you feel like you're not actually part of it. You know what I mean? Because there's a specific event just for women in STEM. Why not, you know, just a general event for people in this field as people in that? You know, those kind of things like
at least for me, like I think when I see like women in STEM events and things go up, I'm like, I really feel like, oh yay, yes. But then there's definitely that, like, because seeing representation and role models is great and important.
Yes.
But I definitely see what you mean. It's kind of like the same thing as when with like International Women's Day. Like, oh yeah, I definitely want to celebrate it, but also like I really wish we didn't need it.
I mean, that goes for like most sort of like
most activism.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. It's so performative, and maybe that's like, I don't know, maybe just the circles that we're in that we see it, where it's like every opportunity for someone to do that, it's done, and you just roll your eyes and you're like, of course that's gonna happen. But on like bigger, like in like the bigger picture and bigger sense of stuff, kind of just like bring it back to where we are now and gonna leave it.
Yes.
For instance, like you're graduating and you look at like you go to a career fair or whatever, and there's big posters on the wall, and it's maybe like a black woman with a hard hat in a construction site, and it's like, look, we're not racist or sexist.
Yeah, and then you go go to whatever conference that is actually promoting, and there's just a bunch of white dudes.
Yeah. And it's like, yes, we have this thing where we tick these boxes and there's no discrimination, blah blah blah, but you just know as soon as if you're like come from a minority group and you step foot on those construction sites or in those labs or whatever else, it's like there's going to be less women's toilets, there's going to be like no accessible toilet, there's going to be like jokes maybe about the color of your skin or your accent, until you
it's
like
also
rip it apart, it's not going to fix itself with like posters. I'm very conscious that we are coming up to time. That's my therapist. Very
it's
conscious.
been a good episode, very good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think we could go on forever, and it's
probably.
I mean, usually we finish off like, oh, what could we do to solve all these problems, or what can we see in the future?
If we were to say one thing to help this, like in the long run, I would just say challenge gender norms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like challenge, norms in general, but like.
And not just from like an individual perspective, but from an institutional perspective as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you ever get a lecturer saying some stupid little sexist quip, I was going to say block him, but that doesn't...
Block him.
Cancel him.
Block him on LinkedIn.
Send an email saying blocked.
Just mute him on Zoom somehow.
Stop receiving your emails. Yeah. And to kids, to the younger generation. Tell them they can do anything.
Yeah, shape it better, because the world is a better place. Let's leave it a better place, even than the dumpster fire that we're in now. Okay.
Amazing.
I think we'll finish up. But first,
thank you, Kayleigh.
Thank you.
Okay, I was going to thank you first, but thank you both, and good luck in your final projects, because you're going to be you're going to be great, and these are going to be stars whatever you end up.
Thank you.
If I could be bothered, I'd edit in like a twinkly sound there, but I can't. So
imagine the twinkles.
Imagine twinkle. In fact, twinkle here. What's our next session? Our next session will probably be around the our LGBTQ plus history and the law, which Callum and I will be doing along with Edinburgh Napier Law and Mooting Societies presentation, which we're super excited about. By the time you listen to this, it will be next week, so that's fine. If you want more information on that, or you want to follow us or do anything else, you can find us at FemSocNapier on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. If you have any questions about joining or doing anything like that, please DM me. That sounds silly, but my DMs are open. I am the DM opener. But yes, thank you all for listening, tuning in. I like a radio presenter, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.